Welcome to Cleaver Magazine's 51st issue reading. My name is Trisha Park. I'm the Associate Director of Cleaver Magazine Workshops and really delighted to welcome you all here today. I'm really excited to share with you just a small slice of the amazing range of creative work our incredible Cleaver writers produce. Thank you, writers, for entrusting us with your work, and thank you for sharing it with all of us tonight. So we're going to get started first with Dara Goodale. Dara she is a Romanian-American lesbian poet and university student living in Lausanne, Switzerland. Woohoo! They write about grief, mental health, and identity. Their work has appeared or is forthcoming in Underbelly Press, the BK, Thimble Literary Magazine, and the Passion Fruit Review. Please welcome Dara.
I'm going to be reading two poems, so one published in Cleaver Magazine, Perfect Conductor. When he was 8, he stuck a fork into an electric outlet. He fried the nerve endings in his right thumb, his sense of touch swept away by the current. If his father hadn't been at home to rip his clenched fist off the metal, now welded to the wall socket, his heart would have stopped. Instead, he died 12 years later when heroin surged free through blue wire veins. Before that August, I asked what it was like to conduct energy. He told me how electrons taste like shots of copper that burn on their way downstream, that bite with AC teeth in zaps of arcane power, how muscles contract till you lose control of your body to spasms, galvanize, like when you OD. And all you see are white hot sparks that lunge at you like they know. You did something you can't take back. The part he left unsaid. The only time he had ever felt important was when his hand alone completed the circuit. I have a second poem I'd like to read that was published in the American Poetry Journal called Elephant Memory, also about grief. They know a decades-old friend by scent alone. When they meet again, roars of joy resonate, their time apart shallow before the depths of mammoth cortex. When they open infrasound mouths, do they speak of their youth? Those easy summers in lush savanna, the past bound forever by perfect recall. They know of loss. When death severs with its absolute blade, they grieve as humans, warm, solid trunks to hold each other upright as they mourn. Their funerals are echo, hollowed, wet, low rumbles of agony that ripple through herd as they press together, regal heads bowed. They will not forget those who have gone. Watering holes look like churches to the eyes of a bird. When parched throats choke up on clumsy burial rites, do they seek their God in something clean to swallow? Do they find answers in the even reflection of the endless, empty sky? What greater sorrow than memory?
Next, we have Sam Kerbel. Sam was shortlisted for the 2024 Oxford Poetry Prize. His first chapbook, Can't Beat the Price, 2025, is available from Bottle Cap Press. His poems have appeared or are forthcoming in Anthropocene, Argyle Literary Magazine, Lana Turner, Libre, and South Florida Poetry Journal, among other publications. Please welcome Sam.
I'm going to read two poems as well. The first one, which is in Cleaver, is called Afterbirth. There is much grief tied to us, not unlike a hospital cot, where a new father sleeps, if he is lucky, and finds himself realizing, not for the first time, he authored something he knows not of, that is of him and is now theirs. When a gift is a gift no longer, but the anxiety of repetition, there is the sparrow's cry, warm bread blowing from that window, insinuating temptation like a comet into tired hearts turned inward without. Uncertainty is ugly, is it not? Until it is known and named. How many hours? The reward is the hours spent. The sea is where it is to be, our last solace of chivalry. Where stars lay, held tightly so, she thrusts you baggily down. Is the Emerald Station where empires, colonies collapse into that which is ordered but unknown. But this is what I meant to say earlier when we were talking before, and you asked if it will all be okay. And I thought how my whole life until now, all I wanted was to disappear and be forgotten. And holding you now reminds me this is not possible. Second poem is going to appear, I think, next month or in December. This poem is called Mass for Lonely Hearts. We look for heroes out of everyday people, we who are not heroes, but creatures, surrounded by legged things, and their legs carry them if they work. If they don't, they find another way. And if it isn't legs, it's the soul or the mind, or humpbacked hills bobbing for waves in an amber field of frequency. And you wonder when paradise will come. What is the ego but something to let go of? Chipping away at the excess block of paradise to find the right paradise. A paradise not in the mind but felt in the legs as you find your way to a town that welcomes you. Welcome to paradise. It feeds you too. Pink-hued fish from the Cinque Terre move like hell to see you. The enemy of the good is not evil, but cheapness. It begs of you to just be fine with what we've called a paradise. It carries on just fine without legs.
Up next, we have Jen Bryant. Jen's writing has appeared in The Sun, Ms., Bust, Anodyne Mag, and elsewhere. She is an editor at Mother magazine and a creative nonfiction reader for Mud Season Review. Originally from the South, she currently lives in the Midwest where she manages grant for a small but mighty nonprofit. Welcome, Jen.
So I'll be reading my flash nonfiction essay from issue 51 of Cleaver. It's called Shelter. My first January in Ohio, the river's surface froze solid. Patches of dirty snow accumulated in parking lots. The sky, the snow, the asphalt, everything was a dull, unrelenting gray. After brewing my morning coffee, I stepped onto the patio, where two melamine bowls were tucked under a lawn chair. I poured fresh water into one and dropped a fistful of dry kibble into the other. Next to the bowls, straw spilled out of a styrofoam cooler tipped on its side, a makeshift refuge built for the skinny tabby cat I'd seen slinking around the apartment complex's perimeter. Despite my efforts to befriend her, she scattered when I approached, preferring to regard me with cautious green eyes from a safe distance. Back inside, as my own two house cats napped in the warmth of our living room, I peeked through the kitchen blinds. The tabby cat crept onto the patio. As she dipped her head towards the water bowl, I noticed that the tip of her left ear was missing. She drank greedily, then climbed into the styrofoam shelter, curled into a ball, and closed her eyes. That winter, frigid cold gripped the Midwest, stealing the breath from my lungs when I went outside. The tabby cat took up residence on the patio, nibbling at the food each morning and bedding down in the shelter at night. If I opened the door even a crack, she scrambled over the fence and disappeared behind the dumpster. In early spring, as the sun returned and the snow melted, I stepped outside to find a mouse on my doormat. Neck broken, limbs curled inward. Swallowing an involuntary shriek, I looked around. Where had it come from? The straw rustled then, and the tabby cat emerged from her shelter. This time, instead of bolting, she sauntered over to where I stood. Arching her back towards my tentative fingertips, she softly began to purr.
Up next, we have Anne Anthony. Anne credits her steady diet of comic books for her ardent belief in superpowers. Her gritty, tender, and amusing stories feature compelling but flawed characters. She has most recently been published in Ghost Parachute, Third Street Review, Bright Flash Literary Review, Flash Boulevard, and elsewhere. In 2019, she released a short story collection, A Blue Moon and Other Murmurs of the Heart. She is a senior editor and art director for the online literary journal Does It Have Pockets? Welcome, Anne.
I'm going to read the piece that was published in Cleaver, and then also a very short piece, flash fiction, that was in Ghost Parachute. Before I held you. Before I held you, your father held you, cradled in his arms. Mine couldn't, strapped securely to the operating table. Before he held you, you flipped, you slippery fish, dropping thud-like into the cavity carved surgically for your release. Before that knife slice, the on-call obstetrician ruled my labor stalled and ordered a C-section. Before that doctor rushed your delivery, he sliced my placenta, unleashing a splash to the floor. Your soon-to-be father, nauseated, fled the birthing room. Before your father abandoned the room, I shuffled my swollen feet into the emergency room, where nurses rushed forward with a wheelchair, but I pointed to my breathless mother, drowning in a full-blown asthma attack. Both nurses dosed her with antihistamines. My mother insisted I drive her to the grocery store, determined to locate my father, begging for a chance to say goodbye, fearing her death, though she'd live another 23 years. Before the search for my father, we played Scrabble in a ground-level apartment, unaware of my mother's allergies to the two long-haired cats sprawled at our feet. Before my parents drove 5 hours to await your birth, a girl I counseled asked the question, "Do you not want children because you work with girls like me?" Before that girl's question tainted my should I be a mother mind, your father pretended to be a father, holding daily conversations with imagined children, calling upstairs to little Jimmy with the promise of a story, asking if little Susie wanted a glass of milk. Before he played at being a father, his older brother, his sister, and yes, every cousin asked for 5 consecutive years when we'd start our family. Before they hounded us, family arrived to witness my walk down the aisle to greet my groom, your father. Before we exchanged vows, I hid my left hand behind my back on Christmas Eve until his older brother grinned, searching for the ring he knew was there. Before the sapphire blue ring slipped onto my finger, your father, still my boyfriend, and I watched television on separate sofas, and he proposed during a commercial break. Before I looked away, unsure, uncertain, I was blissfully unaware of how the weight of you in my arms when I held you would change everything. So today, before your reckless rushing into marriage, before your life tilts and slides into the unknown, before you say, I do, before the judge, before your parents, before this man you barely know, dear daughter, do be cautious. Those 2 words change everything. And then this is a short flash called Everyone in My Family is a Road Sign. This is not nonfiction, just so this is fiction. Daddy was a stop sign, hard-edged, dull red, scarred by BP pellets, a constructed concrete barricade blocking us from making our own decisions. Even Mama, who Daddy misread like most men of his generation, regarding her simply as soft shoulder and curve ahead, but discovering, after they married, she was private road keep out and do not enter. Before she married, Mama pegged Daddy as a roundabout, she could circle slowly, choose her options, and travel in thrilling, uncharted directions. But by their first anniversary, she renamed him Mr. Dead End, a man going nowhere, a man to hold at arm's length, blocking his hugs and kisses. Now, my sister is a yield sign, paralyzed in place, fixed to the rusted and crumbled stop sign left by Daddy's passing, a half-grown woman who searches the streets for a sign of what to do next. I shout for her to switch gears, retrace your steps to the days before her complete stunted stop, to choose to be a U-turn, but she pretends not to hear. From my first breath, Mama called me a caution, warned me to slow down, told me to be prepared to stop. for she's so often aligned with Daddy, not me, building a cruel ache over what might have been between us, eroding mother and daughter into nothing more than a bridge washed out, no access. When confronted by the stop sign, I could not, would not stop. Instead, I embraced not a sign, but a signal, that yellow traffic light, a bright, blaring beacon, which guided me to proceed with caution, to stop, but not forever.
Up next, we have Clifford Thompson. Clifford has 3 episodes of his graphic novel work. It looks like it's episode 3, Reputations. Clifford Thompson's books include What It Is, Race, Family, and One Thinking Black Man's Blues, and Big Man and the Little Men, a graphic novel. His book, Jazz June, a self-portrait and essays, is coming in October. Ooh, congratulations, from the University of Georgia Press. Here's Clifford.
My book is actually out right now, Jazz June. So I thought I would, instead of trying to read the graphic work, I would read just part of the first essay in the book. This is called, I grew up in Washington, D.C., in a Washington, D.C. neighborhood called Deanwood, where daily life did not involve a sense of living in the most important city on earth. Everyone in Deanwood was Black, working class to working poor, some living in housing projects, others, including my family, in private, semi-detached brick homes. We went to school or work in the mornings, came home in the evenings. No one traveled far for their jobs or anything else, the exceptions mostly being trips down the country to families even more insular places of origin in Virginia, say, or North Carolina. In December, in school, we put on Christmas programs because it was assumed rightly that everyone was a Christian in our world, to us, the only world there was. In my memory, the sleepiness was at its sweetest in the spring and summer, when the front doors of houses up and down my street were routinely left open to let the breeze in, when, as darkness came, people rocked on metal gliders on their small porches, when sounds were mostly of cicadas whirring and crickets chirping and the occasional car passing with a lazy roar up the street, when the only other movement was of moths floating near the yellow glow of the street lamps. On the one such night that I'm recalling, in the warm months of 1968, when I was 5, the insularity of my world suffered a brief, bizarre jolt. My brother, then 19, was beside me on the porch and remembers what I remember, which for nearly half a century was all that kept me from thinking of it as a dream. We were gazing at the full moon. Then, beside it, part of the sky began to change color, as if an invisible dial was spinning and painting as it went around, until at the end of a second, there was a perfect white sphere. Where a moment before there had been one moon, we now saw 2. Small children are, for the most part, rational beings, operating in the world based on their feelings, but also on what they've learned. When children see things they want, they simply grab them until they are told and remember not to. When pleased that the things they've said have made others laugh, they'll say them again, soon filing away the lesson that funny lines almost never work a second time. And when confronted with things that go radically against their learned notions of how the world ought to work, children, like adults, become upset, even frightened. Seeing what seemed to me the formation of a second moon, I ran screaming into our little house, trying, no doubt incoherently, to talk about what I'd witnessed. I don't recall that I was upset for very long. If, just beyond the screen door, the world was turning upside down, here in the house everything was as it ought to have been. There was my teenaged older sister sitting calmly in a chair beside the dining room table. There behind her was my mother applying a black smoking hot iron comb to my sister's head. Here was the familiar crackling sound and the old smell of singed hair. Probably the TV was on. I felt safe again, back in the world I knew, the one where I was the lone small child in a household of 2 parents, a grandmother, and grown or near-grown siblings who would let no harm come to me. Clearly, though, I've never forgotten that other feeling. If fear and the accompanying fight or flight is our first natural response to the unfamiliar, our second has to involve jokes. The most common response when I shared the second moon story with friends recently was that I'd had too much of my beloved bourbon, never mind that I was 5 years old at the time I'm recalling. In case you're having doubts of your own, please know that I have never taken a mind-expanding drug or been diagnosed with a mental illness, and unless you count setting out to become a writer, I've never been known for giving way to delusions. And even with regard to that, a good friend told me once long ago that the problem with my becoming a writer was that I'm, quote, not crazy enough. Plus, my story is corroborated by probably the most sober person I know, my big brother. I was almost 20 and it unsettled me, he said recently. His explanation for what we saw is assuringly consistent, if a little light on detail. They, whoever they are, were testing chemicals in the sky. That was all I had to go on until recently, when I finally decided to dig a little deeper on my own.
Next up, we have Michael Grinthal. Michael's poems have appeared in Jubilat, the Los Angeles Review, Mudlark, Yes Poetry, Cleaver, and other publications. He lives in Brooklyn, New York, and has worked for 24 years as a community organizer and a lawyer in the racial justice and tenant rights movements. Mike has also worked for 11 years as a parent and 50 years as a child. Welcome, Michael.
I'm going to read the poem that was in this issue of Cleaver, which is called I Was Washing at Night Out in the Yard, which is a title actually taken from Osip Mandelstam. Crying is excellent practicing. Look how the geese honk and hiss and migrate west, blasphemous, not false, not even false. The sounds I make are obstinate kinds of science mistaken correctly for silence. Yes. And yes is what crying is. Stop including me, sky. And then I'm going to read one other that was in a journal called the Call Center Collective, and it's called Saturday. Look at my daughter, who is the living. Starlings, you have sad news today, which is all one really needs to have. Outside our window rage the windows of the aged, cluttered like the stomach of Geppetto's whale. The curtains and the trees look almost alive. The sea green metallic colored Cutlass Sierra 1985 holiday coupe with unique vinyl roof. She takes my hand, which will rot so interestingly. Let's have science eyes today, which means kind. For example, here is a man. The man is an idiot. His atoms are old and hard like rain. His earlobes are soft as evenings. Daddy, I wasn't asleep. I was having an idea with nothing inside. Google the moon is following us around. Examine sunrise for signs of fever, danger. To imagine the earth turning, her father turning, stupider. Terror of the dumb animal of distance. She buries her fists in its mane. Ride, she says, whispering. There are violets in the air. There's error. There are gnats. We're trapped in immensity together. Ride.
Up next, we have Travis Flatt. Travis, he, him, is an epileptic teacher and actor living in Cookeville, Tennessee. His stories appear in Prime Number, The Temps Review, Variant Lit, New Flash Fiction Review, Neither Fish Nor Fowl, Flash Boulevard, and other places. He is a Best Small Fictions nominee and was longlisted for the Wigleaf Top 50. Travis enjoys theater, dogs, and theatrical dogs, and sun. Welcome, Travis.
I'm going to read my flash fiction, and that's in Cleaver. It's called The Spartans Sack Troy, Alabama. They hunker in the dark, spying from peepholes carved in the galley of the horse, as Police Chief Frank Myers argues with firemen over how best to haul this giant wooden thing some asshole frat boys, they figure, wheeled onto Willow Avenue in the dead of the night, jamming traffic all to hell. Inside, Ulysses tells them to wait for his command. They're tired, thirsty, and hot. knees sore from kneeling on boards, moist from piss and spilled wine. Agamemnon sleeps, his snores muffled by the war banner someone flopped over his face. Outside, a crowd of locals line the sidewalk, some sitting in fold-out camping chairs, watching on, bemused, assuming a parade awaits, though no one knows the occasion or who arranged it. When the courthouse clock tower chimes at noon, Ulysses mistakes the tolling for the Spartans' camp war horn. He turns the wheel, lowers the door, and 40 bronze armored brutes go charging out, spears and axes aloft, to barrel battle craze towards a laughing and clapping congregation of popcorn munching, cope sipping Southerners. Across town, it's the big game, and half of Troy's at the high school this fall afternoon. Something people are saying about a horse and a parade downtown. From the stadium stands, Aiden Myers, son of the police chief, watches as they carry his older brother, Tristan, the Trojans' star quarterback, off the field after an egregious late hit. It's only the second quarter, and their rival, the White County Spartans, is already crushing them 35-0. Star halfback of the Trojans, Ulysses Bray, great, etc., grandson of the mythological one, is having a spectacular game and has run in each Trojan touchdown. Worse than his brother's injury are the googly eyes Aiden's girlfriend, Helly, the cheer squad captain, openly slathers on Ulysses, the humiliator. All of Aiden's friends have noticed and teased him. Not only must he console his hysterical mother's phone calls, SEC coaches have scouted his brother for months, but quell the urge to blacken the eyes of boys he's buddied with since grade school and get expelled. And after several deep breaths and a hot dog, he searches for a quiet spot to compose an appropriately epic breakup text to Helly, the girl of his dreams. The victorious White County Spartans tear a goalpost from the defeated Trojans' field. The spectators, coaches, and players must allow this. It's tradition. In fact, many of them help. Well, not the coaches. They stand back and calculate the cost of the damage, the hell they'll catch from the administration. Now the crowd, which rises in temperature as it carries the post to triumphantly dump on the steps of the courthouse, again, it's tradition, marches down the short stretch of highway connecting Troy High School to the city proper. Aiden Myers attempts to wade through the bodies and find Helly, but discovers she sits on the shoulders of Ulysses, the rival halfback. He sent his text, but she, of course, ignored it. Furious, he plans to tackle the much larger Ulysses from behind, toppling his ex to the pavement. Or is she still his girlfriend? That point's foggy in his mind. He envisions her falling, knocking a tooth loose, and he waffles on the plan. And he's leaning against it, but hasn't ruled it out. When the crowd lurches to a halt, in the jostle of bodies, Helly tumbles from her perch anyway, and halfback Ulysses ignores this, pushes forward, and Aiden slips ahead to help the bruised and confused Helly to her feet. She thanks him, but is interrupted by an excited shouting, pointing. There's smoke in the horizon. Maybe someone struck up a barbecue. Or, that's one hell of a parade.
We have next Danuta Hinc. Danuta Hinc is a Polish-American award-winning novelist, short story writer, and essayist. She is a principal lecturer in the Department of English at the University of Maryland, College Park. She holds an MA in philology from the University of Dansk, where her dissertation, Historia, oh my gosh, I'm not going to try to pronounce that. I'm sorry, I don't speak Polish. I should have practiced. But her dissertation won the Polish national competition for the best dissertation in the humanities. Woohoo! She completed 3 years of postgraduate study at the Institute of Literary Research of the Polish Academy of Sciences and earned an MFA in Writing and Literature from Bennington College, where she received the Barry Hannah Merritt Scholarship in Fiction. Welcome.
So I'm going to read a short essay that was published in the 51st issue of Cleaver, Running. When you leave the place that named you, the world opens and closes at once. Your identity fades into the background of a perpetually expanding frame, balancing between awe and surrender, turning your life into a constant quest for home. Now I live among dark pines in the American woods. Red plums and green apples are always on my shopping list. As I wash them, water flowing down my fingers, turning the fruit, peeling off the stubborn stickers, my mind returns to the orchard of my childhood in search of the mysterious, hoping to catch the thread of my origins from before a needlepoint speck became me. First, it is my great-grandfather's sprint from the front door to the orchard behind the house. He does it often after returning from the battlefield, always dressed in his Polish Legion's uniform, his rogatywka pulled down all the way to his eyebrows. On the days when he takes out the uniform from the storage trunk, everyone around him knows that he has to run. His little girl, Aniela, who will become my grandmother, stands in the door he left open, with her hands over her mouth, as her eyes follow him running, bumping into trees, falling to the ground, getting up and running again. She wonders if he is running away or towards something. She knows that her father is blind from the mustard gas, but she is still too young to understand why he can't stop running. The day he breaks his nose, they tie him down to the guest bedroom bed, but Daniela frees him when others are deep asleep. She's old enough to understand cruelty. She saw horses whipped in the village and newborn kittens disappearing before they could walk, but still too young to understand more. His last summer, he escapes into the orchard 2 more times. The day is warm. The bumblebee bumps against the bedroom window. As the plums and apples in my hands turn like planets in the shower of meteors, tiny stickers accumulate on the edge of the sink, and I think of another sprint. This one happens in the middle of the moonless night deep in the Pieśnica forest. My grandfather, Aniela's husband, is running. Before he jumps from the back of the Opel Blitz truck, he nods to the other prisoners and peeks into the truck's cabin where next to the driver 2 Nazis are deep asleep. He jumps shoeless quietly at the turn he knows well and sprints towards the dark pines. He doesn't look back. In the best case scenario, he has 2 hours. In the worst, he is already dead. He runs for 3 kilometers, turning the math of time over distance in his head until everything is triple checked. Then he stops, puts his shoes on, and runs for another 7 kilometers before he reaches the house. He tells his wife they have no time. After that, they don't speak, just hurry. With a hefty basket, Aniela runs to the orchard and with both hands picks as many apples and plums as she can. They load their young children, Henrik and Genia, who will become my mother, into the horse cart along with other things, and Aniela whips the horse while her husband takes off his shoes to remove pine needles lodged into his skin all the way up to his ankles. Later, he takes the reins and she climbs to the back of the cart where their wide-eyed children are surrounded by items that don't belong there. feather comforters, pillows, blankets, suitcases, and baskets. I place the plums in the strainer while a wave of guilt washes over my chest, and I doubt I can ever stop feeling this way. I didn't believe the escape story until I was in college doing research in the Polish State Archives and discovered my grandfather's name, Józef. I had to translate 2 words, verhaftet and geflohen, arrested and fled. The date is written in the European format, September 20th, 1939. The Nazis kept detailed records. Washing the fruit, a constant on my shopping list. I live in the past I never experienced. I live in the space that was never mine, but is me. I run the loop, in constant motion, in ebb and flow. I am here and there. I live the illusion of belonging somewhere. I place the apples and plums on a linen kitchen towel, my mother's, from when I was a child, and I am back in the orchard. My grandmother stands in the door with a tray in her hands and yells, "The rhubarb compote is ready." And my mother gets up from the blanket to get the tray. My sister, Ola, and I sit among mounds of colorful crepe paper, cutting long pieces for our summer hats. But when mother comes back, we make space for the linen towel on which she places cucumber sandwiches. I rearrange the sandwiches to make all the sides parallel to each other and all the spaces between them even. My mother smiles. When she makes our hats with Bristol paper and staples, all pieces together, I am bothered by that the staples are not parallel to the edges, but she said that the crepe paper will cover all the imperfections. But I will know, I say. Too much thinking, she says and smiles. My paper summer hat is orange. My sister is blue. Both are white rimmed and overflowing with crepe roses and lilies, tulips and chrysanthemums, abundant like in Dutch paintings. After that, Ola and I run through warm pools of light and cool pools of shade. As she stops at a slender plum tree and puts her hands on the trunk above the lime line, I know what she wants. I join her on the opposite side, and we shake the trunk as hard as we can. A hail of plums plummets our hats before we collect them in the basket, and then run again.
Running was also this piece that Danuta read for you was also a 2024 Cleaver Creative Nonfiction Contest semifinalist. Up next, we have Mary Sauer. Mary is a writer and mother living in Kansas City, Missouri, and the managing editor of Salt Tooth Press. She is a candidate for an MFA in creative writing at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. She has published or has upcoming work in Swim, Glassworks Magazine, Murr Literary, Arc Poetry, The Washington Post, and Popula. Welcome, Mary.
I'll be reading my short fiction that was published in issue 51 called The Monarch. Cutting around and behind the main drag in Excelsior Springs, we choose the road often used to bypass the lights and traffic with 2 sharp blind curves one after the other. Dad takes each turn recklessly, at a speed that pushes me right into the passenger door, then left, leaning toward him over the middle console. Newly 9 years old, I find myself bored with the tracks in my brain, worn into canyons by countless laps taken each night before falling asleep. Having memorized in alphabetical order the entire manifest of the Titanic, having become quite certain of what had gone wrong, even God cannot sink this ship, I feel I can now take the necessary precautions required for avoiding an icy death in the North Atlantic. Unprompted, Dad asks, "Have I ever told you about the walkway collapse at the Hyatt Regency in 1982? Cokeheads, fucking millionaires," he says, laughing and asking me to pardon his French. He tells me there was so much money to be made. He tells me they were rolling in it, all of them, but no one could be bothered to consider the architecture. It couldn't bear the weight of all those dancing bodies. Did anyone die? Lots, he says, pivoting at the waist, reaching into the floorboard of the middle seat, the van he sells cable out of, and I take hold of the steering wheel, pushing back and forth the yellow middle sheets of carbonless order form paper yanked from their pink and white counterparts and tossed into one clear plastic bin. He triumphantly holds one up in the air and then hands it over to me. This guy, he says, nodding at the paper in my hand. I think he knows something. Behind the desk at the library, a small woman in a yellow linen dress looks up from her book and smiles at me. She says they've just gotten a new book in about the Titanic, but pushes her lips together in one thin line when I ask, how many people died when the walkway at the Hyatt Regency collapsed? Exactly. Dad and I buy a box of King Vitamin cereal for dinner with birthday money sent by my grandfather, who included in his card an inquiry about the status of my tan. We share it for dinner, and the palisades of each bite-sized crown scrape the roof of my mouth raw. When we finish eating, I lie out on the porch of our apartment in a Little Mermaid swimsuit, reading aloud names printed on an accordion of perforated paper, while Dad paces the living room floor. The sliding glass door is open between us, and flies circle shallow puddles of sticky milk left on the bar of the kitchenette. Having brought the tub from the van inside, he fishes a yellow sheet with Miller scribbled in the first field and says, I knew it. I knew that one was familiar. Are they related? I ask, drawing a star next to Miller on the list. We could find their families, he says. You could write down their stories. Do you think they want to tell their stories? I stand up and fold my beach towel. The sun is going down. I follow him into the kitchen, where he starts a pot of coffee. What do you think the architects, the builders did wrong, exactly? And he says, did I tell you about the time I tackled a shoplifter outside of Walmart?
Up next, we have Michelle Bidding. Michelle was shortlisted for the 2024 Cleaver Magazine Duality Creative Nonfiction Award and has been commissioned by the Los Angeles Cultural Affairs Department for her original poem, Twyla, as a finalist in the Paris Olympiad Cultural Exchange this September 2024. She was shortlisted for the 2023 Craft Character Sketch Challenge, the 2020 Montreal International Poetry Prize, and named a finalist for the 2021 Coniston Prize and 2020 Reed Magazine Edwin Markham Prize. She is the author of 6 poetry collections, including Nightmares and Miracles from Two Sylvia's Press, 2022, winner of the Wilder Prize and named one of Kirkus Review's 2022 Best of Indie. Her chapbook, Dummy Ventriloquist, was published in July 2024 by CNR Press. Recent poetry appears on The Slowdown, Thrush, Cleaver, the Poetry Society of New York's Milk Press, Catamaran, Swim, Terrain, and is featured as Poem of the Week in the Missouri Review. Michelle is writing a novel that centers around Los Angeles and her great-grandmother, stage and screen actor Merrill Mercer, and she's also senior lecturer in creative writing and literature at Loyola Marymount University. Welcome, Michelle.
This piece is called Schrodinger's Sister. So, of course, it sort of riffs on that story, that riddle and experiment. Schrodinger's Sister. You could say I am a thought experiment, sometimes described as a paradox of quantum superposition or divide in perception, to be considered both dead and alive simultaneously. No one I'm close to, privy to my little life's events, doesn't know what I'm talking about. The harrowing tragic in multiples, sensations of standing on rickety bridges with planks rapidly disintegrating. Who says if I'm living or dead? Maybe fate should be observed, could be figured down to results, the subatomic core. The answer found on a balmy night in June of '63 on the west side of Los Angeles. Back bedroom of a small stucco abode rented from the church up the street. My brother asleep in his crib and our parents in love enough to wring the electron heat of their young adult bodies. My father planting his seed in the well of my fertile mother. As far as I can tell, ever since, I'm still here. As for my brothers, the one in the crib and the younger who sprang 11 years after, well, They are not. One family and two suicides makes for a stunning rupture in space, in continuity, though I'd never been more alert, more awake than when I got the first call concerning the brother from the crib scene earlier. I was a newlywed eating chili fries in the food court of the giant LA Mall on La Cienega Boulevard. From a payphone in a corporate bland hall near the restrooms, I talked to a sheriff. Cell phones were not a thing yet. Stunned, I went numb despite my beloved hovering, holding me, my shoulders, something no one could do or had done with my brother and his frayed mental state for too long when he decided to latch his dog behind a baby gate in the kitchen, two large bowls of water and kibble left filled to the rim, so that no concerned creature might interfere in his solitary business. The pills and plastic grocery bag, his condemned person's hood, ready in another room. The bed where he lay down to breathe one last time, his paintings arranged around him as if for a gallery viewing. Suicide is a strange business, to state the gross obvious. Statistically not unusual, but you can imagine me in the mall and my confusion. The sheriff's grave words, "What is your relation to the deceased? Your father's here. He wants to talk to you." How it was then that I fell into a void that was also like being lifeless and living at the same time, or suspended unwillingly, thrust into a dark, airless crate of cosmic proportion, a vacuum of the unspoken, of silent cries and pleas for help, the infinity of what ifs we dwell upon forever. My mind, a new panoply of superpositions. What just happened? When did it start happening? At what point in my brother's brain was it about to happen, but had not yet? His skull, a suicide's vault of secrets. His smile, the last time I saw him, really a lock on his mouth that had already swallowed its key. What I know for certain, once upon a time, there was a moment it was about to happen, but hadn't yet. Then it did. A bridge collapsed. Somebody fell. I was left on the other side. Twice, because my younger brother, 25 years later, also. My thought experiment is not the same as the famous one delivered by Schrödinger in 1935. And it's entirely possible my great-grandmother drank wine and ate schnitzel with Einstein circa 1935 at a salon in a beachy canyon of Santa Monica, since named Rustic. The precise year Einstein and Schrödinger first discussed a cat, a flask of poison, and a radioactive source boxed with a Geiger counter, there to detect decaying carbon atoms, signaling a shattered flask, poison released, an expired cat. Released from its aliveness, that is. In Copenhagen, some say at a certain point the feline is both breathing and deceased simultaneously. No conclusion possible until the casket opens. Reality contingent upon humans, their observations, in other words. When again, 25 years after the first brother threw in the corporeal towel, my younger followed suit, the suicide kind, firearms and booze in his childhood room on Boxing Day, my glass shattered, the poison released. Though I, unlike my brothers, have oddly not died. And the question of positions, multiple in this mortal moment, lives on. Their bodies do not. The predicament no longer exists as to when and if to collapse. Two brothers and the bottom of a ravine. One sister split like a rope, a heart, an atom, a bridge. Your mind and mine. The unretrievable endlessness below. Schrödinger's sister standing in stereo on either side of a cliff with a black box in her hands that somehow continues to purr and glow the longer she looks at it.
Our final reader is Susan Israel. Susan has recently been published in McQueen's Quinterly, Blink Inc., 50-Word Stories, Flash Boulevard, Does It Have Pockets, OK Donkey, Boudin, and several others. She lives in Connecticut with her dog, who sometimes eats like he thinks he's a goat. Welcome, Susan.
Hi, everybody, and I'm going to read my goat story, Goatville. Ambrose Brunch's backyard was a tangle of weeds that his wife Florence kept harping on him about, so he went out ostensibly to buy a lawnmower and came home with a goat. Flo, meet Jane Deere, he chuckled, watching with delight as the brown and white pygmy goat devoured the grass lawns and sumac and crabgrass he had infiltrated their little square of land. Flo was not amused. And where will you keep this lawnmower, bros? The garage? He shrugged. He hadn't given much thought to Jane Deere's upkeep, but soon his neighbors envied his immaculate lawn and asked if they could borrow her for the afternoon at least, until she started to dine on expensive flower beds and lawn furniture and steal checks out of mailboxes for her afternoon snack. Then she was all his again. Florence threatened to leave. I won't play second fiddle to a damn goat, whereupon Jane Deere collapsed. Now see what you've done? You made her faint. The least little excitement upsets them. She's a fainting goat. Florence rolled her eyes and stomped to the bedroom. I'm going to my sister's house, and when I come back, I want her gone. I won't ever complain about lawnmowers and leaf blowers again. It just so happens that we live in a section of town called Goatville. Goats and pigs used to roam the streets free. At least that's what he was told. I guess we're lucky they didn't call it Pigville then. You know where to find me. I'm out of here. Ambrose fed Jane Deere some pellets and held the door open for her. She climbed up on his couch and watched football with him. Such an agreeable companion, he thought, then thought about all the other benefits she could provide: milk, cheese, soap. He began planning his website, The Goat Bunch, as she nestled against him, her horns digging into his ribs, uttering a very soft ma.
Thank you, everyone. That is our reading. You guys, this was incredible. Thank you for making time. Thank you for trusting your work with Cleaver, and for being here and sharing all of your amazing art with us. Cleaver is quarterly, so we do have these readings fairly often. I also dropped into the chat our upcoming offerings. We have regular things like our Ass and Chair session, which is a devoted period of time, 90 minutes once a month, to come and write in a sort of communal space and have your feet held to the fire if that's something that's helpful for you to have some accountability. We also have the other classes coming up. We always have classes on a sort of rolling basis. We have a library of recorded classes as well. So we are really grateful to you for being part of our community and making our community what it is. And we'll see you in the future. Thank you guys, everybody.